Let us talk about the process of evaluating the impacts using the EIM matrix. We mentioned about the EIM matrix in our previous videos. It is basically evaluating the project activities against the environmental components, and then there is a coding system carrying the informations regarding the impacts of a development project. Basically, for each development project, you can have one EIM matrix. This is an example of the EIM matrix. The column here represents the project activities. The project activities shall cover three main stages of the project, which is the pre-construction phase, construction phase, and operational phase. You may refer to the guideline for the housing, new township, and industrial estate development in the figure 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5. Provide you some ideas related to the typical project activities during pre-construction phase, during construction phase, and also during operational and closure or exit phase. Now, in the context of the integrated design project, you may also refer to the master work program, which outlines to you various project activities to be carried out for the project. The principle here, it will be the activities shall be covering from the start until the end of the project. Another thing you need to know regarding evaluating the impacts is that there are various stages of the EIA studies. The terms of reference is the first major milestone in the overall environmental impact assessment process. The purpose of doing these terms of reference is to establish the scopes, focus, and the methods for the EIA studies. In order for you to produce this TOR, there is a process known as the environmental scoping. During this process, the main emphasis is to identify the significant impacts and the priorities. Therefore, the focus of the EIM matrix at the scoping phase is to identify the potential impacts. The identification methods can be of qualitative measures, either yes or no, as demonstrated by the index scoping matrix here. We have a list of the activities here. This shall be checked against the environmental components. Now, how do you determine the potential environmental components? Since it is at the scoping stage, you will need to incorporate as many components as you could in order to avoid any of the impacts has been missed from the evaluations. You may take this as a guide, considering the impacts to the physical, environmental, biological, socio-economic, cultural or heritage aspects. This can be acquired from the Environmental Impact Assessment Guideline in Malaysia. You may also look into the key issues related to the housing, township and industrial estate projects, taking considerations of the relevant studies for the EIA, as well as other requirements by the government agencies, such as soil investigations, erosions and sedimentations control plan, social impact assessment, traffic impact assessment, health impact assessment, heritage impact assessment, wildlife management plan, waste, and etc. Identify as many environmental components as possible and taking this as the checklist to be evaluated against the project activities. Next, you will provide rating. At this stage, you are at the scoping stage. You only want to know whether the impacts are potentially associated with the project activities. There may be two classifications: no impacts and potential impacts, as demonstrated here. Next step, you are looking into the impact severities. You can provide a scale to indicate the severity of the impacts. Now, the numbers of the levels depends on your preference. If you are looking into a quantitative measurements, probably you may look into 2 levels or 3 levels scale. Now, if you wish to refine it more, you may extend to the 4th level. The more levels you have, you will require clearer definitions in order to explicitly classify the respective levels of impacts. The more level it is, the more challenging for you to manage the EIA matrix. Now, if you look at the example here, I find this classifications is quite decent. You are more concerned with the adverse impacts. To make it quantifiable, probably you are looking into 3 levels. Positive impacts are beneficial to you. The response to the positive impact may not be as extensive. Now, to have it quantifiable, maybe you just look at the 2 categories, minor or major. Now, how do you define the severity of the impacts? These are some of the possible considerations: the magnitude of the impacts, the durations of the impact, the extent of the impact, legal and guideline compliance, characteristic of the receptor or resources that is affected. Now, if you wish to have a more thorough evaluations in terms of the significance of the impact, you may also consider the likelihood of the occurrence, which you may classify them also: extremely unlikely, unlikely, low likelihood, medium likelihood, high likelihood, where there should be clear definitions in terms of different levels of likelihood. The meaning of likelihood here means that it is a probability that estimates the chances of the relevant impacts caused by the relevant construction activities. Next, you may compare the 2 parameters: the impact likelihood against the impact severities. Those with high likelihood and high severity can be rated as quite significant, which will require mitigations, and those with the low likelihood and insignificant impact, those can be considered as negligible impact, where mitigations measures may not be compulsory. Now, having this as the coding system, then you may evaluate every single project activities against various environmental components. Sometimes, if it involves the comparisons of different construction methods, you may create another EIA matrix so that you can make side-by-side comparison for you to determine which method is more suitable for the construction project. You may also use this EIA matrix to compare the effectiveness of the mitigation measures proposed, where you can have one EIA matrix representing the conditions without mitigation measures, and create another EIA matrix representing the effects of the mitigation measures. And then compare the two EIM metrics side by side for you to evaluate the effectiveness of the mitigation measures. What you see here, this EIM matrix is a tool for you to represent the conditions of a development project or to compare the effectiveness of various construction methods or the mitigation measure used, so that decisions can be made in terms of the focus of the study, methods to be used, as well as the mitigation measures selected. And it is a systematic method guiding you checking every single construction activities against the environmental components, so that you won't miss any critical impacts due to the development project. And it also provides a comprehensive presentations for the government agency, particularly the Departments of Environment, to evaluate your EIA studies, allowing them to quickly understand the conditions of the project and also the potential impacts to the environment.